It was supposed to be one of those carefree afternoons. The sun was out, the breeze was gentle, and the playground was buzzing with the sound of laughter, squeaky swings, and the thud of sneakers hitting the mulch. My 8-year-old had been begging all week to go play with their friends, and I finally had the time to take them. Honestly, I was just happy to sit on the bench with a coffee, scrolling my phone and catching up with the other parents. The kids were running around playing tag, climbing the jungle gym, and taking turns on the slides. Everything was normal, until she arrived. Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. Shoulder-length blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, expensive but impractical heels for a playground. And trailing behind her was the real storm, her son. About the same age as my kid, but already notorious for being the terror of the community park. If you've ever met a child who thinks the world belongs to them because their mom lets them, that was him. The second they entered, it was like the atmosphere shifted. The boy marched straight to the swings, where 2 little girls were happily taking turns. Without hesitation, he shoved one aside and barked, "My swing." The poor girl looked stunned, and her mom started walking over, but before she could say anything, Karen called out in her syrupy, dismissive voice. "Oh honey, just let him have it. He doesn't like to wait." That set the tone for the rest of the afternoon. I tried to keep my child away from him, gently reminding them to stick closer to their group of friends. But when kids are playing, boundaries blur. The spoiled boy kept barging into every game. In tag, he shoved instead of tapping. On the slide, he kicked others down faster so he could climb back up. And all the while, Karen sat on the bench scrolling her phone, oblivious, or maybe willfully ignoring everything. I could feel the other parents' frustration bubbling. You could see the silent glares, the whispered complaints, the rolling eyes. But no one wanted to be the one to confront her. After all, Karen had a reputation for blowing up at anyone who dared to challenge her or her son. And then, it happened. My child was standing near the climbing wall, waiting their turn patiently. The boy stormed up, shouted, "Move, loser," and shoved them so hard they fell backward. Their heads smacked against the metal pole of the jungle gym with a sickening thud. The sound stopped everything. Kids froze mid-play. Parents gasped. My heart leapt into my throat as I ran, dropping my coffee and rushing to my child. They were crying, clutching the back of their head, and I could already see a red bump swelling. I held them, trying to comfort them, but inside I was boiling with rage. I looked up at Karen, expecting at the very least some kind of reaction, concern, apology, something. But instead, she lazily lifted her sunglasses, glanced at me kneeling over my hurt child, and said in the most casual voice, "Oh, kid's roughhouse. He didn't mean it. Don't make a big deal out of it." The audacity left me speechless for a moment. Her son was smirking, proud of what he had done. My child was crying in my arms, injured. And Karen wanted me to just brush it off as kids being kids. That's when the other parents started to murmur louder. I wasn't the only one who had witnessed everything. I could feel the tension rising, like the entire playground was seconds away from exploding. And in that moment, I knew, this wasn't just about my child getting hurt. This was about standing up to Karen and her spoiled son once and for all. My child was still in tears, clutching the back of their head, when I stood up to face Karen. My voice shook, not just from anger, but from trying to keep calm enough not to cause a bigger scene. "Your son just shoved mine into a pole. Look at this bump. He could have been seriously hurt." You'd think a decent parent would rush over, check on the injured kid, scold their own child, maybe even apologize. Not Karen. She adjusted her sunglasses, crossed her arms, and said with a dismissive shrug, "Accidents happen. Maybe if your kid wasn't standing in the way, this wouldn't have happened." The words hung in the air, and I swear even the kids playing nearby stopped to listen. My jaw clenched. "Excuse me? You're blaming my child for being shoved?" Karen tilted her head, giving me that smug look only entitled people seem to perfect. "Look, kids roughhouse all the time. You can't overreact every time someone takes a tumble. My son is very energetic. It's not his fault if some children are fragile. That did it. Before I could even respond, another mom from across the playground marched over. She was the parent of the little girl who had been shoved off the swing earlier. Her face was flushed with frustration. Karen, this is the third time this week your son has hurt someone here. He shoved my daughter earlier and you didn't even blink. Now this? You can't keep excusing his behavior. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically, like she was dealing with a room full of unreasonable toddlers. Oh, please. You're all just jealous because my son is more confident than your kids. He's a leader, not a follower. Maybe if you all didn't coddle your children so much, they wouldn't cry every time someone touches them. The audacity of it left everyone fuming. Parents were exchanging looks, shaking their heads. You could feel the collective anger rising like a storm cloud. I turned back to her, my voice sharp. There's a difference between being a leader and being a bully. Your son pushed mine so hard he could have gotten a concussion. And instead of holding him accountable, you're insulting my child? Karen smirked. Maybe you should teach your kid to stand up for themselves instead of whining. Life isn't fair, you know. Better they learn that now. My child, still leaning against me with tears streaming down their cheeks, whispered, "Why is she so mean, Mom?" That broke my heart, and fueled my anger. Before I could say another word, a dad who had been watching from the bench stood up. He was one of those calm, no-nonsense types. Karen, enough. We've all seen what your kid does here, and we've all stayed quiet too long. This isn't roughhousing. This is violence. And you're enabling it. Karen snapped her head toward him, glaring. Oh, don't you dare talk about my parenting. You people love to gang up on me because I don't let you boss me around. Newsflash, I don't answer to you. My son is fine, and I won't have you all bullying me just because you can't control your own kids. It was surreal. In Karen's mind, she and her son were the victims. She was twisting the situation, painting herself as the poor mother being unfairly attacked by the entire playground. But this time, no one was buying it. One by one, parents started speaking up. My son came home with a bruise last week because of your kid. My daughter doesn't even want to come to the park anymore. We've all noticed you never take responsibility. Karen's face turned red. She sputtered, pointing at me like I had orchestrated the uprising. This is ridiculous. You're all just making up stories because you don't like me. I know how this community works. You pick someone to blame and you pile on. Pathetic. Her son, meanwhile, was standing behind her with his arms crossed, smirking like he'd won. Like watching his mom fight his battles gave him power. I looked at Karen squarely and said, if you won't hold him accountable, then someone else will. You can't just brush this under the rug anymore. Karen's lips curled into a cold smile. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. You don't know who you're dealing with. The way she said it sent a ripple of curiosity through the group. A few parents exchanged confused glances. Who exactly was Karen threatening us with? That was when one of the older moms, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. She crossed her arms, her voice calm but sharp. Actually, we do know who you are, Karen. And we know who your mother is too. Karen's smug expression faltered for just a moment. And that's when the whispers began. It turned out, the truth about Karen's family, and the real source of her inflated ego, was about to come to light. The playground had gone oddly quiet, except for the kids who had drifted back toward the swings and slides, sensing the grown-ups were in the middle of something big. Karen, usually the loudest voice in the park, was suddenly stiff, her sunglasses sliding down her nose as she tried to keep that mask of superiority intact. The older mom who had spoken, Mrs. Dawson, a longtime resident of the community, looked Karen straight in the eye. Your mother is the principal of the elementary school, isn't she? The same school half these kids go to. I can't imagine she'd be very happy to hear about the way you're raising your son, or the way you treat other parents. The words landed like a hammer. Karen's face flushed crimson, and she snapped back immediately. Leave my mother out of this. She has nothing to do with me or how I raise my child. She's respected in this community, and if you think you can smear her name to get to me, you're disgusting. But her voice cracked just enough to betray her panic. The parents didn't back down. If anything, they pressed harder. Another mom chimed in, "We're not smearing anyone. We all respect your mother, Karen. She's done so much for the kids in this town. That's why it's so shocking to see how different you turned out." Karen barked a hollow laugh. "Oh, please. You all act like you're saints, but I see you gossiping and judging everyone behind their backs. My son is strong, he's going to be someone important one day. Unlike your weak little brats." The dad from earlier stepped closer, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "Karen, strength isn't about pushing kids until they cry. It's about respect, self-control, and accountability. Your son isn't learning any of that from you. And if your mother knew half the things you've allowed him to do, she'd be ashamed." That last word, ashamed, hung in the air like a curse. Karen's smirk finally cracked. Her lips tightened, and she hissed, "You don't know what you're talking about." But before she could spin more excuses, a new voice cut through the crowd. "What exactly don't they know, Karen?" Everyone turned at once. There, striding toward the group, was none other than Mrs. Reynolds, Karen's mother. The principal. Her presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. Even the kids seemed to instinctively quiet down as she approached. Mrs. Reynolds wasn't the type to need to raise her voice. She had that commanding aura of someone used to being listened to. And right now, all eyes were on her, and on Karen, whose bravado evaporated in an instant. Mom? What are you doing here?" Karen stammered, tugging nervously at her blouse. "I was called by a friend," Mrs. Reynolds said calmly, her sharp eyes sweeping over the group. "Apparently, there's been another incident involving your son." Karen shifted uncomfortably. "It's nothing. Just parents overreacting as usual. They don't like us, so they make things up." But Mrs. Reynolds didn't buy it. Her gaze landed on me, on my child still holding an ice pack someone had pulled from their cooler, eyes red from crying. Then she turned to the other parents. "I'd like to hear exactly what happened." One by one, the parents stepped forward, recounting the events of the day. The shoves, the swing incident, the push that left my child hurt. And Karen's dismissive, insulting reaction afterward. By the time they finished, Mrs. Reynolds's face had hardened. She turned slowly to her daughter, and her voice was like steel. "Is this true, Karen?" Karen let out a bitter laugh, trying to recover her swagger. "Oh, come on, Mom. You're really going to take their side? You know how people love to exaggerate. They just can't handle a kid with personality. He's not like their boring little sheep, he's strong, independent, a leader. Isn't that what you always told me to be?" But her mother's eyes narrowed. "There's a difference between being independent and being cruel. And there's a difference between leadership and bullying. You've allowed your son to become entitled and reckless, and you've excused his behavior every step of the way." Karen looked stunned, like she couldn't believe her own mother was speaking to her that way, in front of everyone, no less. Her son, sensing the shift in power, suddenly didn't look so smug anymore. He clung to Karen's side, his bravado slipping just as fast as hers. Mrs. Reynolds turned to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I am so sorry your child was hurt. This behavior is unacceptable, and I will personally see that it's dealt with." Her voice carried such sincerity, such weight, that I actually felt tears sting my eyes again, this time from relief. Finally, someone was taking this seriously. Karen, however, wasn't finished. "You're embarrassing me. In front of all these people? This is exactly why I don't let you meddle in my life. You always think you're better than me, like you know everything." Mrs. Reynolds looked at her daughter with a mix of disappointment and sadness. "I don't think I'm better than you, Karen. I just expected better from you. And it breaks my heart to see what kind of example you're setting for your son." Silence fell. The fight had drained out of Karen's face. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. The crowd of parents exchanged glances, but no one said anything. The message had been delivered. Loud and clear. And I had the distinct feeling that for Karen, things would never be the same again. The tension hung in the air like a thunderstorm about to break. For once, Karen didn't have a comeback ready. Her usual arsenal of excuses, insults, and smug smiles had all been stripped away by the one person she couldn't argue with, her own mother. Mrs. Reynolds didn't yell, didn't make a dramatic scene. She simply turned to her grandson, kneeling down so she was eye level with him. Her voice softened, but her tone was firm. "Do you understand why everyone is upset with you?" she asked. The boy shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado long gone. He muttered, "Because they hate me." "No," Mrs. Reynolds said firmly, shaking her head. "It's because you hurt someone. You pushed a boy hard enough that he got injured. That is not okay. When you hurt people, you don't make friends, you make enemies. And leaders don't create enemies, they earn respect." Her words pierced through the silence. The boy looked down at his shoes, shame creeping across his face. For the first time, he seemed to realize that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't untouchable. Karen tried to step in, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "Mom, don't talk to him like that. He's just a child. He doesn't need to feel guilty for playing a little rough." Mrs. Reynolds straightened and fixed her daughter with a glare that could have cut glass. "He should feel guilty. He should feel remorse. That's how children learn right from wrong. And if you had been teaching him that from the beginning, we wouldn't be standing here now." Karen's face twisted in indignation. "So this is my fault?" "Yes," her mother said simply. "It is." The words hit harder than any insult the other parents had thrown. Karen's lip trembled. For once, there was no witty retort, no way to spin the blame. She was cornered, by her mother, by the truth, and by the collective judgment of the community. Mrs. Reynolds turned back to me. "I want you to know that I take this very seriously. I'll personally cover any medical expenses if your child needs to see a doctor. And I'll be addressing this behavior at home. You shouldn't have had to endure this." I nodded, finally feeling like my voice, and my child's pain, had been validated. "Thank you. That means a lot." Other parents chimed in their appreciation too, thanking Mrs. Reynolds for stepping up where Karen had failed. For once, the atmosphere wasn't just one of tension, it was one of solidarity. Karen, meanwhile, looked smaller than ever. Her shoulders slumped, her sunglasses now clutched nervously in her hands. It was as if her entire identity, this illusion of superiority she'd built, had been shattered in front of everyone. "Let's go," Mrs. Reynolds said firmly to her daughter and grandson. There was no room for argument in her tone. They both followed quietly, Karen shooting glares over her shoulder but saying nothing. As they walked away, a collective sigh of relief passed through the playground. Conversations bubbled up again, kids laughed on the swings, and the tension that had gripped us all began to fade. I sat with my child, hugging them tightly as they leaned into me. The bump on their head would heal, but the sting of the moment had left a mark on both of us. Still, I couldn't help but think of the irony. The woman who had spent so long bragging about her perfect parenting had been publicly humbled by the very person she always used as her shield, her respected mother. That day taught me something important. Entitlement can protect someone for a while, but the truth always finds its way out. No amount of excuses or denial can stand when accountability finally arrives. And sometimes, it arrives wearing the face of your own mother.